Kaylin, tell me what it means when someone says they want multiple streams of income. Tell the people. Why do the people need multiple streams of income?
COVID says it all. What's the difference between having an LLC for your business and being trademarked?
For me, I'm trying to get multiple streams of income because I'm trying to retire early. 62, can't do it.
All right. Thank you for joining us on the second episode of the Stream Chasers podcast. My name is Kaylin Nelson.
And I am Candace Williams.
And today we have a great episode for you today. Before we kind of get started, first we just want to say thank you to everybody that tuned in over the past couple weeks, that listened to our first episode on MLMs and pyramid schemes. If you didn't, please check that out on all your favorite podcast platforms and or our YouTube.
Today, before we get started on today's episode, Kaylin and I decided that we were going to dedicate a segment to checking in with each other on the past 2 weeks. So you get paid on the 1st and the 15th. And because we give you that space to make sure that you are given time to apply the knowledge that we're giving, no need to give you knowledge back to back to back to back if you can't do anything with it, right? So we like to check in with each other and say, what did you do over the past 2 weeks to add to your stream chasing? So Kaylin, what did you do over the last 2 weeks?
So over the last 2 weeks, since we had Crystal, our former guest, come on, I did some research on MLMs and pyramid schemes just so I can familiarize myself. Put a lot of time and effort into the Stream Chasers podcast, of course. I'm all about providing quality content for our people out there. So just the planning process, day in and day out, making sure that we can package a great product for the people. How about you, Candace?
So, because we were talking about MLMs, I personally am not involved in an MLM, but my mother is doing one that's like around fitness and wellness and nutrition, etc. So I invested in her. So I called her and we talked about her business plan and tried to like reroute some things to make her stand out a little bit from everybody else that she's selling, her colleagues, if you will, selling with. So I'm hopeful that my investment in her will be an investment in me in the future. It's like a backdoor investment. It's how that's going to work. So I'm hopeful. I'm just really excited to see her doing something that she actually feels passionate about. Because obviously she has a 9-to-5, right? Like we all do. But she's doing this MLM like Crystal because she feels really passionate about the product. So I'm hopeful that her passion about, I just like to invest in, it's good to see your mom feel good about something. But also that, like I said, that she gets an additional stream of income that she can, do whatever she needs to do with that she gets closer to retirement. So,
Okay. No, that sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds good. So today we have a good episode for you all. We're going to dive into how to ask for a better salary and a lot of those HR principles, the do's, the don'ts, the things that you probably didn't even know that you could do. Everything based around your salary. And there's a lot of reasons why we want to kind of get into the details of this, because there's a lot of people, as Candace mentioned earlier, that we all want to become stream chasers.
Right.
But the problem is a lot of us work a 9-to-5 job and we need to stay on that job to be able to fund our initiatives, our business ideas, and that type of thing.
Right.
However, there could be a lot of times where we're leaving money on the table because we don't know how to negotiate a salary. We don't know how to ask for a raise, things of that such. So that's what we're going to dive into today. But before we get started, Candace, can you tell us about any examples about, have you had to go through anything like that?
I mean, I've changed jobs. Let me see. In my career, I've worked for 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 different organizations. So at least 5 times I've come in with salary negotiations. When I was really young, fresh out of college, obviously, I actually did negotiate my first salary now that I think about it. But I negotiated it with back pocket information because a friend of mine had come out the year before. So we both interned for the same company and we were coming back to work for them full time. And a friend of mine, she was a year earlier. She graduated a year before me. And so she called me and she was like, listen, this is what I took. Don't take that. Go for more. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm like 20. I'm like, woo, this is a lot that you're asking me to do. But I had a reputation at that company for good work. I had been there. I'd interned for them for over the whole time I was in college. So 4 years plus I'd interned for them. So they knew me, they knew my work, and I think they knew my worth. And I felt comfortable in my worth going back and pushing a little bit after having that back pocket information. However, every other time that I joined an organization, I didn't have that back pocket information. So me pushing on an organization saying I want more was really just about me knowing my self-worth and knowing about the job, I guess. Sometimes I was successful and felt confident enough to do it, and other times I wasn't. You know, I feel like as I've progressed in my career, I've become way more successful at doing it. Like now, I don't go into a job without a negotiation. I actually turned down a job with a state government not too long ago. Maybe, let me see, probably less than a year ago, because they just couldn't get where I needed them to be. And finally, once they inched over, like they did a whole lot of work and they inched over and they barely met the mark, I thought about it and I said, it took so much for them to get there. It's not worth my time.
Like pulling teeth.
Yeah, it was like pulling teeth to get there. And I was very well aware of like what kind of job I was facing. Like it was not an easy job, and they knew it wasn't an easy job. So it should have been a better salary from the start, you know? So I would say the negotiation was kind of pointless at the end of the day. I'm sure the guy was not happy that I kind of was like, you know what? Thank you, but no thank you.
After all that.
But it was worth it. It was worth it because it just wasn't what it needed to be. How about you?
So I graduated in 2008, which a lot of people know that was right in the middle of the recession. So I was just happy to get a job interview. Trust me, it was a process.
Okay.
But once I did get an interview, you know, they offered me like I think $30,000 for a great position that had a big title. But again, I knew I was fresh out of school.
Right.
I just wanted a job. I was tired of my parents saying, hey, get a job, you know, every day.
Right.
Well, you know, that whole nine. So I took it. But then it was from that job that I tell everybody I learned the most. Okay. So it was for a woman-owned small business contracting company where we bid on federal contracts.
Okay.
I had the title to be, or I was the business development person.
Wow.
So I kind of got a lot of experience in learning about contracts. And it was there that equipped me for the rest of my career to know how to negotiate or at least what to ask.
Okay.
For example, there was a contract that we were getting ready to bid on, and it was an admin contract. So I think the client at that time was looking for 3 admin assistants to place in variety offices. And what I saw was that these rates for an admin assistant level 1, the government was willing to pay them $85,000 to the business.
Right.
But then the business was only going to pay that person $32,000.
Ooh.
So that's what first equipped me to understand, like, you can make some money.
Yeah, it's money out there.
Yeah, it's all about being equipped with that knowledge. Granted, I understood that the company needed to, you know, bring in that money because that's part of their bottom line, their revenue and stuff like that. But that's what first helped me learn, like, okay, if I'm going in for a position that's not an admin assistant, that's whether it be an IT or a project manager, they're paying $250K for these bodies. So you could at least give me 50% minimum. So that's what helped me kind of learn, like, ask for what you want.
Exactly. Because if you don't ask for it, they have a thought about what they want to give you, and if you don't ask for anything more, it's like, thank you, good to know you, and this is what you get, and that's just that. And I think people should know that even on the government side of things, while there isn't a revenue or a bottom line that they're trying to protect, there's money on the table for projects, initiatives, and things can get cut short or moved or, you know, put asunder for later. If I feel like Kaylin is worth that extra dollar, you know what I mean? And I think while we have our own personal experiences with it, you know, it's good that we have a guest here today that's going to give us a little bit more knowledge behind our personal experience, because right now we just, you know, chopping it up. But Kimberly Eddings, I should say, is the Senior Director of Human Resources at the National Association for the Education of Young Children. So that's commonly known as NACY, where she's responsible for designing the strategic direction for talent strategy, development, acquisition, and operations. Kimberly has provided human resources, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and talent strategy expertise for NACY, George Washington University, Friendship Public Charter School, and The Ohio State University, and a variety of HR roles. She also serves as a board trustee for Two Rivers Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. Kimberly holds a Master's of Science in Educational Leadership from St. Thomas University in Florida and a bachelor's degree in Political Science and African American Studies from The Ohio State University. Kimberly also completed an executive certificate in Diversity and Inclusion for HR from Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. Kimberly's passion for people led her to begin an Instagram giving HR tips at The HR Nerd. Okay, Kim currently lives in Maryland and loves spending time with her 7 nieces and nephews and her best pup, Mingo. I had to read that because it's professional and I felt like it deserved the credence. Normally I would just do it off the top, but this was it needed.
No, that was needed.
Exactly. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Yay.
So exciting.
Not a problem. So let's start simply and let's dive into because I read a lot of words about what you do at work, but can you, in layman's terms, tell the folks what it is that you do at NACI currently?
Yeah, before I get started, I was debating if I should ask this, but I'm going to ask it.
Okay.
What's an MLM? You said that a lot in the introduction. So
Yes.
What's an MLM?
No, so that's great. So MLM is multi-level marketing.
Got it.
And I'm not sure if you know, but I don't want to assume, but that's just very quickly, that's just what typically when you see like a sponsor up at the top and they say, hey, I'd like to bring you on under this certain business model. And do you want to get in? Sometimes you might have to pay an initial investment. And then a lot of your success is due to how many people can you bring in under you, which helps the next person. And then the ladder starts to.
Got it. And so the reason why I asked that is, one, I didn't know.
Okay.
Complete ignorance. But also that's what I do is I encourage people to ask questions. Right?
Okay.
I encourage people to get comfortable in the space where they work in order to feel a sense of belonging, inclusion, and safety in the workplace to be able to ask questions that you don't know the answer to. So human resources, basically, the elevator speech for human resources is we make sure organizations don't do stuff, fill in the blank for that word that you know I want to use, to get themselves in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? So we make sure our companies don't break the law.
Okay.
But we also make sure that our employees have access to what it is that they need to be a whole employee. So whether it's legal, whether it's like protections that are given to you by the state or the Fed, or vice versa for the company. But we just make sure that the company is safe and we make sure our employees are safe. And there's a whole host of things that fall under that umbrella. But in layman's terms, that's what I do. I look out for the company, I look out for the people.
Wonderful. So as we kind of gave away in the intro earlier, one of the things that we're really interested in is making sure that our stream chasers know how to ask for their worth at their 9 to 5, right? So I'm going to kind of break it up into 2 parts. So let's start with, I already have a job and I need to ask for a raise because I feel like I make more money or I need to make more money. And let me give you a very real example because I think this happens a lot on the job. You get close to colleagues, friends, etc. And I know that Rebecca makes more money than I do for the exact same job that I have. So I want to storm my boss's office. I'm storming the office and I'm going to say, hey, Becca makes more money than I do. That's not fair. As a matter of fact, it might be racist. I'd like a raise. How's that going to go over?
Don't do that.
Okay. All right. Got it.
As much as you want to, don't do that. So what you just talked about, basically, that's an EEOC claim. So we're going to set that aside. So if you're doing the same job as, what's her name? Rebecca? Becky? If you're doing the same job as Rebecca and you're a black woman, Becca's whatever her name is a white woman, like that's the EEOC claim. Right?
Okay.
So we're gonna set that aside.
Okay.
And just talk about the dynamics of asking for a raise.
Okay.
And so what you want to do, right? So yes, if you and Becky are doing the same job, Rebecca, and you want to ask for more money, don't start with your manager. Right. I always tell people, manager doesn't have the control over the money. Right. It's finance. The finance team, whether it's your CFO, whether it's director of accounting, whatever. Finance has the control over the money. HR has the control over the pay bands.
Okay.
Over the compensation bands. So some people think like, oh, I don't want to go over my boss's head. Like, nah. You go to HR and you say, listen, HR, can you give me more context about why my salary is X dollars, right? Or can you tell me more about what went into the development of the salary range, right? And they're not going to tell you the salary range, but they may tell you, like, they may throw words at you like compensation philosophy or market analysis or whatever. So you just want to start the conversation,
okay?
Right? Because you don't want to go into talking to your boss without information. Because at the end of the day, all your boss is going to do is they're going to try to put you off and be like, oh, let me go talk to HR. Right. And then they won't go to talk to HR.
And they'll be dead.
Like, yeah, and then it'll be dead. But you want to make sure that, and there's a way to do it where you're not causing problems. Like, you're not causing, like, swirl. You're just having a conversation with HR.
Okay.
Right? I always tell people, like, befriend your HR people. It will not hurt you to just
drop in every now and then.
How's it going? You know, build that relationship. Because also, quiet as it's kept, and it's not quiet, but like getting a job, negotiating stuff, all that stuff is about relationships. You know, you got to, like, you have to put in the time to build those relationships. You know, let me drop into HR and say, you know, I've been doing some thinking, and you know, about my compensation. I have these questions for you. Obviously, you're going to want to have the questions ready.
Okay.
And then just listen. You know, listen to what they're saying, because they may be dropping clues that they don't even realize that they're dropping. And then once you have the information from your HR person, then you want to consider, all right, and a good question to ask your HR person is, what's the budget cycle for the organization? So when do teams or managers or you know, directors or whatever, when do they ask finance for more money for their budget? And usually what happens is some companies do their fiscal years based on calendar year, so January to December. State governments, I believe, do it
September to
October. And then some people do it based on the school year, you know, which is June to July. Like, it depends, right? So you want to know what your fiscal cycle is. So if your fiscal year begins July 1st, that means that the budget was already determined March 31st.
Got it.
Right? So the budget is usually finalized 3 to 4 months before the beginning of the budget cycle. Unless you work for like a really forward-thinking organization. Some people do their budgets like 6 months to a year in advance. But you want to know about that cycle, because if your budget cycle runs June 1 to July 31st and you ask for a raise on June 1, you're not going to get it because it's not in the budget. Right? Unless there are ways to do it. Like, an example that I tell people is, like, if you go out and get a job offer and they really want to keep you, then you can basically do whatever you want.
Right.
But that's, again, be careful with that. We can talk more about that. But that was a broad question, but I think, like, I
agree.
Yeah, so something you said stands out to me. So you said we would go to the CFO's office to ask about the budget cycle.
Okay, you don't want to go directly to the CFO.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, because, you know, I'm just trying to envision that, like, on a Tuesday morning when I go to work, if I want to raise, I just feel like my office, if I go to my budget office or whoever I'm going, and I say, what's the budget cycle? They're going to be looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, first of all, how do you even know about a budget cycle? And then 2, why do you want to know? So I just feel like that might be
I would argue that they would actually probably be very impressed that you would know about a budget cycle. But no, you don't want to go directly to the CFO. I was just kind of giving that example of, like, who holds the pockets. You can either ask your HR person, like, you don't want to. So I would say don't go directly to, like, someone in my role. Don't go to the CHRO. Like, you go to the HR generalist, go to the HR specialist. Like, ask somebody who won't make waves.
Gotcha.
Or even in conversation with your boss, you know, to show that you're interested in, like, how the organization works. Because people like to see that. People like to see, like, you're invested in our organization. You're invested in our strategic growth. You're invested in how we do business. It doesn't have to come up in a conversation about the raise. I would actually argue you should probably keep it separate. And say, like, yeah, just curious. Like, I would love to learn more about how we do budgets here.
Right.
What is the budget cycle? You know, you're asking for one reason. They don't know that. You know.
Yeah, they know that. Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I would agree. In my current position, I am over a team of like 17 people. And so there's a budget there. Raises are conversations that have to be had in that kind of situation. And what we do, I work in contracts, just for clarification, doesn't necessarily involve the budget. But if you know when the budget cycle is, it makes our job a lot easier. Now, I differentiate between an invested employee and an employee who's just coming to get a check, showing up so they don't get fined, right? Between people who know those tidbits of information. I could imagine several different positions or several different job descriptions where I currently work, where if they had that kind of background knowledge, it would make what they do make so much more sense. But it's all about, if you know how the organization works and how it works with other organizations or how it works with governments, all of those things help make your job easier. And then it gives you the background pocket information for stuff like salary negotiations, et cetera, et cetera.
And you said something very interesting, like the people who are just coming up to get a check versus people who are invested. Like 100% your manager, HR will know which category you fall into. 100%. So if you are somebody who is disengaged, if you are somebody who doesn't go above and beyond, if you are somebody who you just want to raise because you want to be compatible with Rebecca, but Rebecca is killing it. She's putting in her 50, 60, 70 hours a week. She's going above and beyond. She's showing up. She's volunteering for the extra projects. That might be why Rebecca's making more money than you, right? So you have to be willing to look inside and be like, you know what? Am I really putting in the work? Do I deserve a raise or do I just want one?
Got it.
But to caveat that, so just because Rebecca's putting in 60 to 70 hours or doing this extra work or staying late or, whatever the case may be, the job doesn't call for me to put in 60 to 70 hours. The job calls for me to work 40 hours a week, 80 hours every 2 weeks, and I'm killing it at my job. Does that not mean that I shouldn't get a raise?
So you are meeting expectations.
And that's what they hired me for.
The raise that you will get is the meeting expectations raise. So you'll get that cost of living increase.
Yeah.
You'll get that 2.5% meeting expectations. But meanwhile, Rebecca is doing, if let's say a rating scale is, on a scale of 1 to 5, you're getting that 3 meeting expectations. Rebecca's getting that exceeds expectations. She's getting that 5% increase year over year over year. That's going to add up to a lot of money. And so that's like it's not a one note thing. Like there's so much that goes into compensation and being willing to like being willing to ask the questions. There is a lot of fear in asking for an increase, and also knowing your worth, right? So if you are the one who's going above and beyond, if you're like being able to like being willing to just say these are my accomplishments, right? So that introduction that Candace gave, I kind of went back and forth with Candace, like maybe you shouldn't say all of that, but then like no, like be willing to be like, no, I'm a badass and I deserve.
You're fine.
Okay. Like, be willing to say, like, this is, like, I am good at what I do. I'm excellent at what I do. Pay me what I'm worth, right? And so it's multifaceted. It's a multifaceted conversation.
So can I ask a question? Because some of what we talked about kind of assumes that there are performance reviews and raises tied to those performance reviews. But what if you are at a job that has a performance review cycle, but there are no raises tied to that, right? So do I send an email like after my boss is giving me my exceed expectations, right? So I'm good. I'm doing the things. I have self-evaluated. I know that I am good at what I do. But there's no raise implied. Do I send an email and say, okay, so I know the budget cycle is 3 months and I'm in 3 months ahead of the budget cycle. So I know she's building her budget for her team now. So I'm good in that department. I've got my exceed expectations. I've got my accomplishments listed out. Now that I've gotten these things, how do I say, pay me, please?
So for those of you who work in organizations without performance-based compensation increases, like there's a school of thought on like whether it's good or bad. Like I won't comment on that, but it does make it a little bit harder for certain. No, I would not start off with an email. I'd start off with a conversation.
Okay.
And I mean, we can role play it a little bit. Like, let's Candace, you're my boss, right? And I'm coming in and I've prepared for the conversation.
Okay.
One, prepare. Do not go in cold, because you go in cold, she's just going to give you that stare and you're not going to know what to do. Like as managers, I know you know this. We've perfected that blank stare of like, why are you in my office?
Yes.
Like, what are you talking about? Right? And so you got to be prepared for that. So prepare with your talking points. And your talking points are going to include what you've accomplished over the past year, the projects that you volunteered for. Your talking points are, your talking points are going to include where you see your role going. right? So you want to spend about 30 to 40% talking about what you've done, and the bulk of the conversation talking about, like, these are the projects that I'm super excited about over the next year to 3 years. I'm really excited to grow in this company. I love, working for X company, and I really want to make sure that my compensation accurately represents my growth trajectory.
Okay.
Because what you want to get them thinking about is you want to get them thinking about you as an investment. And then you want to get them to start thinking about the fact that if they put the time and the money in now, it will return. The return will come. So Candace, you're my boss.
Okay.
Candace, thank you so much for meeting with me. And I'm doing this really cold. I'm doing this cold, so you're gonna hear a lot of ums. Thank you so much for meeting with me. I really just wanted to talk to you about how this year has been going. We had our performance review. Thank you so much for that feedback. I look forward to working on my areas of growth. And if you could just talk to me a little bit more about where you see my strengths are, that'd be very helpful.
Okay.
So what I just did was I put the onus on her to start talking. Right? So I'm getting comfortable. The more Candace starts talking, the more I'm relaxed, because you're nervous going through this conversation.
Yes,
so I'm giving
nervous.
Candace a couple minutes to talk and talk to me about what I got to do. And then she's probably wondering, like, why are we having this conversation?
Why are we talking about her strengths? Because we just talked about her strengths, for sure.
So thank you so much. And you know what? And that, just again, that mirrors everything that we talked about in our performance conversation. So thank you for reiterating that. The reason why I'm here today, the reason why I asked to meet with you is because I wanted to talk about my compensation. Right, and Candace, how compensation conversations can be really nerve-wracking. So let's just put it on the table. Like, I'm really nervous right now, but I really think it's important that we talk about this. My salary, right now at $65K, it is, when I came here to this company 2 years ago, it absolutely was, it absolutely represented what I thought I should be earning in this role. However, since I started, I've taken on this project, to do X. I've worked on this team. I have, you don't want to say I've gone above and beyond. You want to be very specific.
Okay.
Because saying above and beyond is subjective. Right?
Gotcha.
And so I've worked on these projects. I've been on these teams, and I'm also so excited about these 3 projects that you've assigned to me. I'm excited about the growth of this company. I'm excited about the growth of my role. And I'm really just looking forward to it. I'm looking for an opportunity to match my compensation with not only my performance that we've talked about for the past year, but also with my growth trajectory over the next 6 months to a year. And with that, Candace, I make $65,000 now. I would like to propose an increase, a 10% increase.
Okay.
Now,
that's very specific.
Very specific.
Right? And there's some people will tell you to go in with a number. I say don't go in with a number, because the person you're talking to can't do math that quick. Right? So they're probably going to be like, 10%. That sounds great. But also you want to know your number beforehand, and you want to ask for above the number. Right? So if you want to make, what did I say, 65?
65.
So 10% of 65 is 6,500. If you want to make 70,
right, asking for 71,
then you're going to probably want to ask for 12%.
Okay,
because they'll talk you down to 10%. But that's one of the ways to have a conversation. That definitely assumes you have a good relationship with your boss. If you don't have a good relationship with your boss, the conversation is going to be a little bit different. But I hope that's helpful.
It is.
No, it definitely is. But I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, but that's the whole fear component. Because, say we come in prepared, we go into the manager's office, we have that conversation, and, they just say, all right, we'll get back to you. Like you said, they may say, we'll check with HR, whatever the case may be. Should there be a case of fear on the employee? Because now I've gone into the office, I've laid out all my truths out there. But now that I'm not happy, whether that's with my salary or whatever the case may be. Should I be worried now because you may be thinking in your mind, oh, Kaylin doesn't really want to be here because he's not making that $75K. Candace doesn't really care about the mission anymore. She's already told me about that. So should we feel some type of fear?
So if your boss thinks that you don't care about the mission or that you don't want to be here, that's your fault, right? Because in everything I said, I talked about how excited I am about the mission, how excited I am about the projects, how excited I am about the company, how much I love working for you, my manager Candace. Like if your boss thinks that you don't care, you've done so. I shouldn't say like unequivocally. That's the HR part of me coming out, but like you have to show up, right? If you've been showing up for the past year, honestly, like no one's gonna think that you don't care. They're going to want to keep you. They're going to want to retain you. They're going to in a good company, because there are companies out there that have terrible cultures, but that's why you come in with your talking points ready to like reiterate how much you care. But you also have to make sure that your actions to date back that up. Right, so if you're supposed to be at work, 9 to 5, and you walk in at 11 o'clock, your assignment's always late, your project's always late,
leaving at 3,
you're taking 2.5 hour lunches, so basically you only put in an hour and a half in the day, and you do that all the time.
And a 15-minute smoke break,
right? And you're not getting along with your colleagues, you're not getting stuff done. Then like you either shouldn't ask for a raise, or you should go to a company where you won't be bored, right? And I think there are organizations who thrive off of that fear. Like they absolutely will. They want you to be afraid. And my advice to anybody who works for an organization like that, and I know it sounds flippant, but like do your best to get out.
Yeah. Right?
Because they don't deserve you. And I know that's easier said than done for a lot of people. But the more relationships you build, and the better, deeper quality relationships you build outside of the organizations, like you can get out. And if there's one thing that I always want to tell people, I tell my current employees this all the time, like step into your power, right? Like just because we pay you a paycheck doesn't mean you don't have any power. And you only have as much power as you believe you have at a company, right? So if you have power to negotiate your salary, if you believe you have power to ask for a raise, if you believe you have the power to say, you know what, you don't deserve me, I am leaving, right?
Agreed.
That's I think that's so important. I get real like passionate about that, because like as much as I work for a company, you're not gonna make me feel like I don't deserve X thing,
Agreed.
No, it's almost like you need to have a little bit of arrogance about yourself, and they say this about all professional athletes, but when you think about us, we're not professional athletes, but we're professionals. And all professional athletes have some type of ego. I don't care if you're more humble about it or you're more like the most outspoken person. They all have some type of ego, and you kind of have to put that on every day when you go to work. Like, look, I'm me.
I'm here to do the thing.
Yeah, I got the skills, I got the experience, this is me, this is why you hired me.
Yes, exactly. Actually, to Kim's point, my current organization I think is a pretty decent organization. I've sometimes have issues with the philosophy.
We're not going to put that on the
podcast. But generally speaking, their glory. However, I came from an organization that had a terrible culture, and they thrived on that fear. And I would say that the main proponent of that fear came from like the head of HR. Like they wanted that fear, and they wanted you to tremble in your boots that every day you walk in here could be your last day, because today it was almost awe-inspiring the way that the fear kind of made employees work. Like, I mean, there were certain individuals when they came, it was like people would run and scurry and hide. And at some point I learned a lot of that organization about myself. I learned a lot about the job that I do. So, there's some give and take there. But what I will say is one day I came to myself and I said, this is nuts. This is absolutely crazy. You shouldn't be running and hiding because someone's walking down the hall and you haven't done anything wrong. You just like, I gotta get out of the way. They can't see me. Close my door, close the shades. It was like, it was a lot. And so I, like him said, did my best to say, okay, it's time for me to go. Like, I just gotta go. It was absolutely crazy.
And not to like derail, because we are talking about compensation, but I also want to flag, like, there were probably signs of that when you interviewed at the company.
Yes, right? There were signs.
And so you have to also be willing, like when you're looking for a new organization to go to, like don't just look at the compensation. Culture is a huge part of what I call total rewards.
Yes.
Right? So total rewards is, compensation, retirement, your benefits, your culture, whether or not you can have a flexible schedule. So when you think about compensation, changing changing the conversation a little bit and thinking about it as total rewards is going to probably increase or improve your experience.
Agreed.
Because I personally would much rather make, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say 60,000 because ain't nobody making 60,000. But like, I would much rather make $10,000 less at an organization where I have flexibility, where I can work 5 hours one week and 80 hours the next week, where I can work remotely, where my boss is invested in my growth. That's so key. And where HR, where they're not assholes, right? Like, and let's like, I love HR, but like, there are some terrible HR people out there. Like, you have to know what you're looking for when you're going in for that interview process. Like there are things there are questions that you can ask, and there are things that you can look for to make sure that you're not signing up for that fear-based kind of culture when you want to ask for an increase.
Agreed. And to period that, or to mark that, when I went into that organization, I remember having a conversation with the young lady on the phone about HR. So she's like the HR generalist, right? About compensation, I'm sorry. And she's like the HR generalist, and she's like, okay, well, what do you want to be paid? And I'm like, I asked for like 10,000 over what I was making at the time. So I'm like, okay, I'll ask for 70,000 or 80,000 or something like that. And she comes back and was like, no, I'm going to give you 100. She's like, this organization is nuts, so we're going to move on. And I was like,
red flag.
And I was like, she is the GOAT. Like, she is coming in. I'm about to be making 6 figures because she volunteered it. But she knew what I didn't know, which is that this organization is crazy. And for you to do this job, she was a compassionate person. And she was like, I would not put anybody in this position making less than this, because you going to need it for your sanity.
Isn't it fascinating, though, that you lowballed yourself.
I did.
Almost $40,000.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just
that's
gonna,
crazy.
I'll take a good 70K. And she was like, no, sis.
And we have been trained. So society has trained us to be grateful.
Yes, and I was very grateful.
I say, F that. Don't be grateful.
Yes.
Right? You just and like, honestly, because nothing is more devastating than taking money, to accepting a salary, and then learning 6 months to a year and a half that you could have made $40,000 more. Your engagement is just gonna you might as well just leave.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you, but that goes back to the whole point, because I've experienced that too. I asked for a certain salary, and they told me, oh, we'll give you 35 more than what I asked for. But then come to find out, they're trying to just fill the body, especially when you're dealing with contracts. So they're saying, well, if this person asks for 40K and we'll give him 70K, we know he's not going to turn that down. But little did I know, my counterparts are getting paid 30 more than that.
And one of the tricks about that, when you're applying for jobs, is you have to be kind of like firm in yourself to make sure that you don't answer. But job applications are always going to tell you what do you want to make, and you just put negotiable, right? There are some application systems that force you to put a number. So this doesn't apply there, but just always put negotiable. When you're on the phone with somebody and they ask you what you want to make, as they ask you the question, you respond and say, well, can you tell me what the salary range is? Just keep pushing them to tell you, like, let them be the one to give you a number, because I see it all the time where people just don't know the value of the job. They don't know the market. So for example, the DC market is very different from the Ohio market. One of my horror stories is I moved from Ohio to DC in 2014, back to DC in 2014. I applied for a job, and my asshole supervisor at the time, I hope you're listening, my supervisor at the time, he was like, well, what do you want to make? And I gave him a number that was like $8,000 more than what I made in Columbus. I'm thinking, I'm about to be paid.
And that's reasonable.
The market in DC is completely different. And he jumped on that. He was like, absolutely, we can pay you that. Come to find out, you could have made the position. And the reason why he was a dummy. He works in HR, so he should have known that I would know the second I got there that I could have gotten $25,000 more. Right. Because you see the information. And so my level of engagement went all the way down, right? Because I'm like, you lowballed me and you knew what you were doing, right?
And you knew I would see it.
And you knew I would see it. Well, I don't think he knew I would see it because he was not smart.
Wasn't thinking that far.
No, he just wasn't smart. Again, I would be listening. And so, like, you just... when you're operating with ignorance, like, you're going to leave money on the table. And so just like you guys are talking about how you put research into the MLMs over the past 2 weeks, you can't just decide that you're going to ask for a raise and then do it. Right? You gotta do the research. A lot of people like Glassdoor. I'm indifferent about Glassdoor because it has some flaws, but like PayScale is a good website to do. If you go on Indeed and just look up, not necessarily, don't just look up your title, but look up the title above yours. So for example, if you're an accountant, 1, look up accountants 2 and 3 and see what, you want to create your own salary band. And I would say you should be looking at least 20 different positions on Indeed that have salary information so you can build a picture of what it is that you should be making.
Got it.
The nonprofit sector is going to be different from the corporate sector. The corporate sector is going to be different from state and local government and the Fed. So that's how you want to build your own salary range using as many data points as possible. And I also would add the caveat, like, we're not talking about executive comp here. Executive comp is a whole different conversation. So for those of you who want some guidance on executive comp, you can hit me up at the HR Nerd. But, like, it is, and then also different for entry-level positions.
Okay.
And you can find all that on PayScale, though? Like the difference between the entry-level positions and a mid-manager and all that type of stuff?
You can find the information on PayScale, but again, I would say that you want to use multiple sources, multiple avenues of information. So PayScale, Glassdoor, use Indeed, use USA Jobs, because USA Jobs have pay scales for the Fed. And I always encourage people, like, it's okay to base your salaries off the federal government because if you're in the corporate sector, it's going to be higher. If you're in the nonprofit sector, it's going to be a little bit lower. But use it as a baseline. Gotcha. And then talk to people, right? So this is about building your network, right? So LinkedIn has there's a value proposition for LinkedIn that, like, if you make connections with your fellow accountants in the area and just ask them, what do you make? Or if you don't want to ask them what do you make, ask them what should I be asking for?
Gotcha.
People like to talk.
Yes.
People like to share information.
Yeah.
They like to talk about their salaries. Yeah. Why does this cap?
Especially in this area.
Especially in this area. So just reach out to people, right? And build a picture of what you should be making, but do not make a decision. Rebecca makes more than me. I'm going to go into my boss's office tomorrow and ask for a raise because the likelihood of it happening is not great.
Got you. So you got to come equipped.
Yeah. That was, so you kind of started a good segue to our second segment, which was kind of talking about, my entry into a company. So we talked about some red flags that, as I was going for a raise, I actually got quite a few involuntary raises on that terrible culture job, but it was to keep me. And that's when I realized how valuable I was generally and to them, and that I should be looking for elsewhere. But anyway,
when you got the second job, did they counter? Did they try to keep you?
When I got my second job, yes, they tried. Not only did they try to keep me and counter with money, but they also tried to counter with, unfortunately, disparaging the name of the company that I was going to. Like, oh, you going over there? It's crazy over there. Really? I heard this and this, and I was working contracts. Their contracts department is nuts, and this, that. Like, they had everything in the world to say about them, and I was like, there can literally be no place worse than here. I am going. And it took me a minute because it was a lot of unfortunate, like, messing psychology and messing with your head. But I had to make the decision that, you know what? It can't possibly be worse than here. So I am leaving.
And before you segue into the job offer, I would also say that, like, if you work for an organization that doesn't have a compensation for, like, a plan, like they, like, you get this much raise or like, just like a plan for compensation. Another route to go is start looking for other jobs and get them to counter. But you have to be very careful with that. That is something that, like, you have to be careful with. You have to understand the culture of your organization. Because there are some organizations that will say, all right, we'll counter, but in 6 months we're going to get rid of you.
Yes.
Right? There are actually organizations like that. But there are also organizations who will say, like, I understand why you felt like you had to do this. here, we really want to retain you, so here's what we'll do.
Agreed. I've given that advice before, and I've always told people, like, if you come in with a job offer, especially given that I'm a manager, right? But if you come in with a job offer, be prepared to take that job. You know what I mean? Because you never know how your manager or whomever you're talking to is going to take that. Because people get...
Sometimes you got to take a temperature check, like, which way the wind is blowing. And like,
Very good. Yes. Agreed. I mean, I've done it myself. I've come in with a job offer, and sometimes I've come in with a job not with the intention to start a bidding war for my presence, but just to say, I'm leaving. Hey, I got this job, I'm leaving. And their question is, well, can we counter? Will you allow us to counter? So that's been an interesting situation as well. So as we make our way into talking about your entry into a job, right? So I've tried the raise thing. It has not worked. I am moving on. I'm going to go into a new place. They're going to hire me. We've had a wonderful interview, a wonderful situation, and now it's time to talk about salary. So the HR generalist calls me and says, congratulations, Sometimes it's a call and sometimes it's an email and says, congratulations, we've selected you and here's the salary. And let's say I'm impressed with the salary. Do I just take it? Do I just sign on the line? Let's say. Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Never.
It doesn't matter if you are working it's your first job at Target. Or if you are becoming a CEO.
Okay.
Never take the first offer.
I wonder how many people have made that mistake.
Never accept the first offer.
And why is that?
Because you're leaving money on the table.
Okay.
I can guarantee you I would say the only people who probably offer what is budgeted is HR people. Minus my boss, who is not intelligent, because they know, like when I hired one of my team members, I gave her the max scale because I knew her first day she would see she'd see other information, but never take the first offer. And and I'm not saying never accept the first offer because it could be that that's the maximum they can offer, but always be willing to ask for more.
And it never hurts to ask that question.
It never hurts to ask that question because they have already made the decision to hire you. They don't want to go back through the hiring process.
Okay, so I'm not going to lose this offer.
So I saw a video yesterday on Instagram that made me very upset, actually, and it was this girl. And she was like, "This is how you negotiate a salary. You tell them that you want $65,000 and you can't accept anything less." And I was like, that's horrible advice because you don't demand, right?
Okay. Right.
You just ask the question, and you ask the question with evidence. Okay. Right. And so if you're impressed with that salary, we'll use round numbers and say you're impressed with the $100,000 offer. Okay. I would be willing to bet that the salary range that they have approved, if they've given you $100,000 off the bat, their salary range is probably anywhere from 90 to 120, probably, because that's what we deal with, $20,000 to $30,000 ranges most of the time in HR.
And so that means...
and so here's what you do.
Okay.
Right, and if your approach is going to be different if it's on the phone or if it's an email. So if it's on the phone, you immediately say, "I am so excited to come and work for X company. I'm so excited to come work for Stream Chasers. Okay. I loved meeting all of you. It was a really great experience. Can you tell me more about the benefits package?" Okay. Because they're expecting you to go straight to salary. You want to shake it up a little bit. Okay. Can you tell me more about?
Keep them guessing.
Yeah, right. Keep them guessing. Can you tell me more about the total rewards? And, what's the retirement package look like? Going down the list. And then you say, before we go, the $100,000 is a really great salary. As we were talking, it just occurred to me that I really would like to counter. Can you match me at 110? Okay. Can you meet me at 110? Okay. And then most likely they'll say, "Let me get back to you," because they got to go talk to finance. Right. Right. Or they got to talk to the HR director or the person who's going to, or if they already have the budget approved, they'll say, "Oh, absolutely." When they say that, "Well, absolutely," that they had a budget. And you've probably
about to sell yourself short.
Should I be insulted?
No, it's a game. Okay. It's a game. Everybody plays it, right? Because if as your manager, if I can bring you in at $10,000 less than what I have budgeted, that $10,000 goes to my budget, and I can use that money elsewhere. Okay. In the year. And so it's a dollar. It's a numbers game. Okay.
This makes me want to go back to the private sector now. Just having some of this knowledge, it's man, I could. make a killing out there.
Yeah. But let's say you're not satisfied with the initial offer.
Right, because that happens.
I would say that during the interview process, you should have already known what the salary range is. There's a sweet spot. You don't want to ask too early because you don't want them being like, oh, she only cares about the money.
Right.
So you don't want to ask in your phone screen. You don't want to ask in your interview with the hiring manager or your interview panel. But at some point, if the salary has not come up, you'll want to schedule a conversation with the HR person, not the hiring manager, right? Because people often think that I do all the hiring for my job. I don't have time for that. Like, the hiring manager does the hiring, and I'm doing all the behind the scenes things. And so you just want to schedule a quick 10-minute conversation, but you don't want to say it's about benefits. I mean, compensation. You want to say, I'd like to talk to you about benefits.
Okay.
Trojan horse.
Yes.
Right? And just slide it down in there. I'm like, oh, I had a question about, can you share the salary range with me? That's it.
Okay.
Don't say, can you share the salary?
The salary range.
What is the range?
Got it.
And so that gives you a lot more negotiating power as well.
Agreed. And I would say, because federal government jobs and state and local jobs generally show you the range. So let me back this question up a little bit, because I work currently in local government, and so there is usually a range shown on the jobs. Usually when we offer jobs, we go right down the middle. We split 50%. Like, we don't go low, we don't go high, we go right down the middle. But that being said, our finance folks make us budget for the high end of the range, because you just never know, right? So, and they're all about, if you're going to show it, you better have the money for it. So that's kind of how we budget. With that being the case, right, can I expect to make the high end? Like, if I'm on a federal government job, because like a lot of times federal, local, state, whomever you are, whatever type of government you are, they either go for the step one or scale one or whatever they call it, or they split the difference and go right down the middle. Is there a way though to reach the higher end? Like, is it possible?
So with the caveat that I'm not like a super expert on the Fed, but I would say that principles apply no matter like what sector you're working in.
Okay.
And the principle is, like, if you have the experience, if you have the education, if you're qualified for the role, you should want to try to negotiate based on that.
Okay.
Right? So if the salary, if the range, if they've gone down the middle with the range and there's still $30,000 left in the range, you'll say something like, and I would not do this verbally, I do this in writing. You'd send an email, thank you so much for the offer. So excited to work for you. Thank you for the offer of X dollars. Based on my level of education, my master's degree or my PhD or my bachelor's, based on my education, based on my 10 years of experience, and based on my track record of successfully navigating X project, which is what you want me to do here.
Right.
I would like to counter your offer, and with an increase of 15%.
Okay.
Or with the Fed, you're probably going to want to use a dollar
figure. Right.
Gotcha.
And you're going to want to put that in writing.
Okay.
Because people, for some reason, it reads like it reads better when you're laying out your accomplishments and why you should hire me than hearing it, because people forget. And then see what happens. But also just remember, like, this is where at the offer stage is when the employee has the most power, because nobody wants to go through another recruitment, because recruitment takes forever.
And I will step out of my like Stream Chasers interview role for a second and put on my manager role at work and say, she is absolutely positively correct. If I selected you as my candidate, you can ask for the world and I'm gonna try to get it for you. I'm gonna try to hustle as hard as I can inside this organization to get you whatever it is you want, because I do not have the time, money, or energy to do this process again. I just don't want it.
And most of the time you need some work that needs to be done because you're behind, which is why you're trying to hire.
And all of this is giving me PTSD because I'm currently on maternity leave. I told y'all before, I have a newborn. And when I get back to work, there are 3 positions waiting for me to hire for them. And I'm like, I do not want to. The hiring process, God bless your soul, is not my friend. I don't like it. So.
And yeah, even if they have like a second and third person, like if you're the first person, they want you.
Yeah.
Step into your power, right?
Yes.
And just be like, and you also, Rand, this is not like HR advice, it's just like people advice, but like have that group of people that's going to hype you up. Right? I got my group chat. Right?
Yes.
We hype each other up like, you go get that money.
Go
right?
get it. I would also say that the other portion for our stream chasers, kind of as you're thinking about your jobs and what you want to do, and using your extra compensation to jumpstart your businesses, etc. Kim was totally correct about the extras, like the total bit. Like if you can have a flexible schedule where you could be off one day a week, or you could minimize your time, that's totally helpful, because maybe you can use that time putting in towards your other business. So maybe you don't get it in compensation, but you get it in flex schedule or something else that's super helpful when you're out here trying to get it as a stream chaser.
It's not always about the dollar amount.
Yeah.
Right?
The job that I'm currently in now, I left money on the table at another organization, a significant amount of money, because it wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it. Right? My quality of life is significantly better than it would have been at this other job. Okay. And that's like, it's not always about the dollar amount. Also, they have a 5% retirement match, which I always tell people, like, look at the benefits.
Yes.
Right? Because a retirement match is no joke. Don't leave money on the table. I hope you're maxing out your retirement accounts, people.
Definitely do that.
Exactly, because that's another form of income. Eventually, you're going to need it. So we thank you today for joining us, Kim. We have learned so much. Stream Chasers, I hope you learned everything.
Yes.
Hope you were taking notes. You had your situations together, because I have notes for myself. I'm like, maybe I need to go back.
I got so much stuff in my
like, it's just swirling. Like, I need to go see somebody on Monday. I wonder if I could ask for a raise on maternity leave. I have things in my head that I need to go deal with. So I'm going to take the next 2 weeks in between paydays to figure out my situation for when I get back from maternity leave. So we appreciate you. A question that we ask all of our guests on the show, given that we interview stream chasers as they are going about, what is it that you have in your head? What is the next project? What is the next phase? What is the next thing for Kim, aka the HR nerd? What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I fully admire anybody who's chasing the stream. I admire, and one of the things I would say that though is not everybody is an entrepreneur. And I fully respect the entrepreneurial life. It is a lot of work.
It is.
I would say that life is not for me specifically. I am all about my career, as Candace knows. And so for me, what's next for me is like, what's the next move? Like, I'm constantly looking ahead as like, what's the next move? And my career goal has always been CEO by 40. I'm about to be 35. And so I got 5 years to like map that out. And it's all mapped out. And so for those of you who are not, like, who want to do the dual track of like stream chasing and also, the career, like, just have your career mapped out, and don't let anybody distract you from what it is that you want to do. Because at the end of the day, for me, I know what my compensation needs to be for me to be happy.
Okay.
At that CEO level, and that's what I'm working towards, right? So, but aside from that, I do have my little ratchet Instagram account. I promise it's not ratchet, but it's the HR nerd, and I have it only because like I like to talk about this stuff. I like to help people. I like to when people ask me questions, because there's such a wealth of knowledge out there that people just don't have, because either they don't know what questions to ask, or they're afraid, or whatever the case may be. So you can find me on there talking about random HR stuff, and I'll always encouraging people to know how powerful you are in the workplace. Because one of the things, I read this quote, it's really powerful, and all organizations should take this approach, is you can't win the marketplace without winning the workplace, right? And if you working for organizations that value your people, and knowing that like your people are your biggest investment, your payroll is going to it's the biggest thing that you pay for in the organization. And so people know your power, know your worth, and get that paper, get that stream, chase that paper. Okay.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. This is fun.
Yes. No, this was great. We would love to have you back on again, because like I said, my mind is rolling right now. There's a lot of HR things that we can dive into. So again, we're just thankful that you took the time out to join us on Stream Chasers podcast.
Yes.
And for all the Stream Chasers out there, if you didn't get anything from this podcast, here's a few. 1, HR gets paid because they know the ins and outs. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to chase multiple streams. And it's okay if you don't want to become an entrepreneur. Don't let anybody force that on you.
Right.
And Kim hit on something very key at the end of that. She knows what salary makes her happy. So that's all it's about. Candace and I, we're interested in entrepreneurship, but that doesn't mean that has to be your dream.
Right.
So whatever it is, pursue it. What's going to make you happy, and just let's go about it.
Right. At the end of the day, stream chasing can be about chasing a solo stream, right? And like Kim said, CEO by 40. So she's chasing the stream, whether she wants to admit it or not, she's chasing the stream, but it's one particular stream that's going to make her happy. So, but at the end of the day, it's going to require work. And we always say it, stream chasers do the work, okay? So you can see this podcast and all of your podcast platforms, your Apple, your Google, your Spotify, all the places. You can watch it on YouTube, okay? Yeah. You can visit our website, www.streamchasers.work, because stream chasers do the work. And you just got paid.
Just got paid.